Super excited about our next guest. Jay Bilas was on the call this weekend as A&M did beat Kentucky in overtime. Let's go to the Brian Foley Law Hotline. We are joined by Jay Bilas. Jay, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. How you doing?
Doing wonderful. Hey, I appreciate you making time to be on the program, and a big fan of your work. So let's just start things off with the atmosphere there at Reed. What did you think about it?
It was great, especially considering the students weren't coming back until tomorrow, I guess. Looked like some of them came back, but it was a fantastic atmosphere.
What was different in your eyes? You've probably seen a couple A&M games as you were prepping for this one, in the way the team approached Kentucky as opposed to some of the other games that they had this year.
I don't know that the approach was any different. I mean, I'm not in every one of their practices, but their preparation was excellent. And but it is for every game. Buzz Williams and his staff, they do as good a job as anybody of preparing a team and putting a game plan together. And it's one thing to put a good game plan together. It's another thing to communicate it and implement it the right way. And I think Texas A&M does a great job of that. But, you know, they certainly got off to a good start shooting the ball. For a team that doesn't consistently shoot the ball well, that was a nice bonus. But, you know, those things kind of course correct over the course of a game. And I think A&M's numbers, you know, they shot it better from three overall than they normally do. They're probably a 30% three-point shooting team. They shot close to 40 in that game. But they were engaged from the beginning. They got great contributions, I think, from everybody. Solomon Washington was fantastic when he came into the game. Anderson Garcia was terrific. You know, Jace Carter came in the game and gave them really good minutes. So it wasn't just, I mean, I think people look at the box score or something and they might think that Tyrese Radford, Wade Taylor were, you know, of course they combined for 60 points or whatever it was. You know, that's the headline. But the most important thing were the contributions of some of the others. You know, Garcia, if I remember right, had like 4 or 5 steals, and, you know, the offensive rebounds, they did a great job offensive rebounding. That ultimately won them the game by getting like 3 straight possessions. They had the ball for over a minute with under 2 minutes to go because they got extra possessions off the offensive glass. So, and they didn't turn it over. You know, against the team, and it's not like Kentucky's a big turnover forcing team, but you know, A&M coughed it up 19 or 20 times against Auburn. And when you don't shoot it well, you're not going to overcome that kind of thing. And so they took care of the ball, they pursued the ball, and they made unbelievably gutsy plays when the game was on the line.
Talking about Jay Bilas here on TexAgs Radio. Jay, one of the things that I think that A&M has really struggled with that it seemed to come together was having Wade Taylor and Boots Radford in the same game contribute the way they did, and it really started with Boots going downhill attacking the rim.
Yeah, well, that's who he is. You know, he's a left-handed driver, and he can make shots, but he's not a great shooter. But for him to, you know, shoot the percentage he did, I think he was 50% across the board, except for the foul line. I mean, you know, he's a good free throw shooter, and he was missing free throws until, you know, those big 2 at the end. You know, when they had to have him, he made them. I mean, he's got guts. But yeah, he hasn't been, you know, he's been in and out of the lineup with injury and all that stuff. But that looked like the old, you know, sort of the vintage, you know, Tyrese Radford. And, you know, that's a backcourt that complements each other really well, because Taylor's, he's a bucket getter, and he's not the most efficient shooter. He's not going to shoot a great percentage every game. But, man, when he gets hot, you know, you can ride that wave all the way into the shore. And Radford's a really nice complement to that because he's so tough and such a great rebounding guard. And he just finds his way, you know, he finds his way to the basket, and then he seeks out bodies and gets to the foul line. That was an impressive performance. It's not one of those things I think you're going to see every game, because that's asking a lot. But the fact that I think it shows a lot, and that's why a lot of us, you know, rank Texas A&M in the top 20 to start the year. They're capable of doing that. But bad shooting nights, things like that, you know, you're going to have some results you won't care for in those nights.
Well, what does it do for them, too, considering they had these high expectations, so we all did? They take a couple of steps back, but yet they showed this is the kind of team they can be on the right night.
Yeah, that's sort of the thing when you look at statistics and analytics, which I'm a believer in. You know, we measure everything in our society, and we should. There's nothing wrong with that. But analytics tell you what you've done. It doesn't necessarily tell you what you're capable of doing. And I think, you know, you look at the body of work that Texas A&M has put together to this point, There's been some really good things. There's been some things that haven't been as good. But I think what that game shows you is what they're capable of. So I think Texas A&M is capable of beating just about anybody. Are they one of the 5 or 10 best teams in the country? I wouldn't say that, but they're capable of beating the 5 or 10 best teams in the country and building toward the end. I mean, people tend to forget, but about this time last year, we thought Connecticut, the first 9-10 games of the season, the best team in the country, and they lost 6 out of 8 when they started conference play. And we're like, what's going on? UConn is faltering. UConn's not as good as we thought, and they wind up winning the national championship. It's a build up to the end, and this is basketball. I mean, you look at any level of basketball, teams can lose games. That doesn't mean you're not capable. And this is about being this sport is about being at your best at the end of the year. Every game's important and all that stuff, but I don't know anybody in any profession that's at their best all the time. It's how you perform when you're not at your best.
I love your thoughts on this. We have seen over the years, the reason there wasn't a panic button pushed after the first couple of conference losses was Buzz Williams' teams typically figure it out, and they reach their highest potential, whatever that may be. What is it about a Buzz Williams team that typically figures it out and gets to that level?
Well, I don't think it's just a Buzz Williams team. I mean, I get what you're saying. I've never understood what panic button means. Like, when is it the right time to panic? Panic doesn't help anything. At the end of every game, you assess it. You can be excited or disappointed for a short period of time. Then you assess it, and you look to where you can do better, and you get back to work to do better the next game, and make those things habits. A habit is what you revert to under stress. There's nobody that rises to an occasion. That doesn't exist. As far as you're going to do something in a game that you're not capable of at other times, that doesn't exist. What you do is when you're under stress, that's when you revert to your habits. That's when your habits show. And they're a team, I think, that generally has really good habits. And they drill it, they work on it. That's part of who they are. And I thought, now making shots is one thing. Like I'm not going to the making shots part. They made some really good, really difficult shots throughout the course of the game at Kentucky. But I think the way that they played and the way they went about playing was more of who Texas A&M is versus some of the games they've had prior, where I thought they were at times a little bit out of character. Like LSU was totally out of character. I thought some of what I watched on tape, I didn't see the Auburn game live, but I watched it on tape on Synergy, and that didn't look like the Texas A&M team that I had expected. That was more on Saturday against Kentucky what I expected, and that's not the make or miss part. That's different. You can take a really good shot and miss it. That's not a big deal. But the way they defended, the way they responded in key situations, it was impressive, and it's who I think that team is.
Jay, you mentioned UConn earlier and the tough start that they had. They were the only team in the top 6 that didn't lose this weekend. What happened this weekend in college basketball?
I don't know. I think sometimes we tend to overreact to certain things. We're going to have, this is a year, and I think that it's becoming more the norm where, talent is more spread around now. Part of it's because of the transfer portal. You got some of these outstanding mid-major players that are transferring up, and then you've seen a number of players who were, quote unquote, average major conference players that have transferred down, and now they're busting out and, able to show, who they are away from a role. And so the talent is spread out now. And some people use the term parity, but you're more capable on a given night of getting beat. And that doesn't mean, that Purdue and Arizona and all these teams aren't the best teams, but especially on the road this year, they're a little more vulnerable game to game, it seems. But, you take this particular stretch, we've had a week or so when it seems like we get caught up a lot in the ranked versus unranked thing. So, oh my God, all these top 10 teams lost to unranked teams. So unranked doesn't mean you suck. You might be the 27th or 28th best team in the country, but you're still capable. And that's one thing I think we tend to lose at times, that perspective.
Jay, let's close out with this. After a couple of years of NIL and transfer portal and college basketball really taking advantage of it, do you like the direction it's going? Or are you like a lot of us that are like, eventually these guardrails are coming? Obviously, with your lawyer background, how do you see this unfolding, and is it good?
Well, one, it's great because we've had an unfair system to the point of being immoral for over 100 years now, where athletes were restricted when nobody else in this multi-billion-dollar industry was restricted, and including their fellow students. It's been an absurd thing, and we're not even to the point of it being fair. It's just one step closer to being fair. And I know that some of the old school coaches don't like it because they say, what are the rules? And I would ask, well, what are the rules with regard to your salary or your staff or the rest of the world? Why do we have to have rules with regard to athletes, but there are no rules with anyone else, and it works just fine? I think I get it that coaches don't like that players can transfer. I think a lot of old school guys enjoyed saying my way or the highway when there was no highway. Now you say my way or the highway, there's a highway, and the players can leave. And I think that's perfectly appropriate and not a problem. The coaches get to, they talked about players opting out of bowl games. So what about all the coaches that opted out? They left for other jobs and left their teams playing without them, and nobody seems to have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with any of this stuff. Where I think it's headed, though, is at some point in the very near future, we're going to be signing players to contracts. And that's going to be cleaner and easier, and it'll make better financial sense. Everybody will know what the market is. And if you sign a player to a contract, just like you sign a coach to a contract, you have a buyout in it. And so if the player leaves, they owe you a buyout. I mean, it's perfect. It's so simple, but the NCAA doesn't want to do it. And if they really want to make this an enterprise that makes sense, then reduce the size of Division I basketball to 150 schools, 120, whatever you want it to be. And that way you will have every good player will want to play on that level. And you will have more talent spread out over fewer units. With roster sizes, there will be fewer places to transfer. So that'll take, the contracts plus that will take care of part of the transfer issue that people seem so upset about. And it'll be a much cleaner and easier enterprise. And that way, if you had 120, and I know there are conference contracts that will be difficult to deal with, but what they should do is just strictly revenue share. So that one division, that everybody makes money, they all put it in a pot, and they dole it out equally, and we'll see who spends it better. And that way you have cost certainty, everybody knows what they're going to get, all that stuff. And we'll see who's more efficient and who makes the best decisions, just like you would the NBA or the NFL, which is exactly what college football and college basketball are. And have been for decades. It's the NFL and the NBA where the players go to class. That's the only difference.
Jay, great stuff, man. Thanks so much for joining us. Hope to do it again.
Thank you.